Everybody, it's Joe Gibbert, Shaylee Modi, and with us today is Sala Eckhart once again for the Project Ready Podcast. And so today the topic is, and one of the things that I've remarked and noticed over the years of working within the industry is people talk about the AEC like it's a single thing. And there are some marked similarities, certainly similarities and challenges we think we address across the board, but an architect, an engineer, construction, and the owner also are very unique and have a wide variety of flavors, if you will, of what that AEC and O represent. So today I want to explore a little bit, what are those differences? How varied are they, if you will? Those differences, how do they drive technology, the use of technology, and what's distinct? And of course, what's common in terms of the various challenges and pain that everybody experiences within that very broad umbrella that we refer to as the AEC/O. So with that, just trying to figure out where to start with. I guess we start with the A component, right? It's the alphabet and all that good stuff. So, I think the obvious thing is that architects, they design the thing that you're going to build, at least from an exterior perspective. But let me turn this over to Sala. So, Sala, from your perspective, the architect's role.
Well, thank you, Joe, for inviting me for this discussion again. And so I've been thinking a lot about how the modern day architects are involved in the overall technical and digital building life cycle. Back in the day, the architects they were producing drawings, and that's where people oftentimes consider that the architects draw buildings, they produce drawings, and that's it. But drawings are just a simplified output about the financial, social, and technical outcomes of a building. And that's where I see that architects are contributing to the vision of a real estate investor, developer, that they create the form and the function for what the investor wants to invest in. And then if you have a really good architect, that building is going to stand time and it will increase in its value. And that's what we see in the price of real estate too. So from my perspective, architects are not drawing buildings. That's for someone else, but they create the physical form for the vision of what the technical, social, and financial performance of built environment is.
So it's a lot more than just the how the structure should look, is your point, right? It's what is that structure and just asking and paraphrasing. So it's what is that structure going to be used for? Who's going to be using it? How does it sit within the ecosystem of the city or the environment or the, you know, real ecosystem of the planet? Is that sort of your contention?
Yes, because now that we are thinking about smart cities and thinking about how buildings are built and developed and how regions are being developed, etc., they are long-term strategies for how the population grow regionally and where people can work, where they can live, where they can have their hobbies and everything that is involved in their lives. So, like you said, architects they have a much broader purpose in creating the future of our built environment than just creating mere drawings for an individual project.
Right. That's like 30 years ago, right? When you had that, the big plot printers and well, engineers the same, I guess. But yes, as you have the internet of things and a whole bunch of other stuff out there. And again, smart cities, all of that, the role of the architect is much more expansive than it had been previously. But it begs a question, though. So, where does the engineer then fit within that ecosystem?
Well, from my perspective, if the architect is giving the form and the function for something that the developer investor wants to invest in, then the engineers they make sure that the system's technical performance supports the overall social, financial, and technical performance of the building and what goes beyond that individual building. So it's a marriage between architects and engineers to collaborate on creating something that is harmonized and balanced and optimized and overall predictable. So when thinking about digital twins, metaverse, and how we can predict where the spending in operations or in capital expense is spent, then it needs to be a close collaboration and a dialogue that what are we actually aiming for? What is the outcome that we are trying to achieve rather than just focusing on the short outputs?
Right, and then the how does it actually work, right? The physics of it is where I understand the engineer comes in more. There was a client I had years ago, won't name names, but this is from my other company. It's really one of the projects we had that led us to Project Ready. Was their head of IT was formerly a CAD manager, but he was an engineer, and he goes, "Huh, architects hand me a piece of balsa wood, and I'm supposed to make it stand up," which still sticks with me. I found it a very funny comment at that point because everybody's within the industry, but everybody, has a particular axe to grind. I'm sure that the construction end is going, "Gee, thanks, engineer. Do you know how am I going to get this material to the site? Is that fair in terms of as it cascades across that system?" That with the architect's perspective, the architect's role drives challenges for the engineer that drives challenges for the construction entity.
Yes. And those challenges, they are opportunities to innovate, those are opportunities for improving. And it requires the project teams to be formed much earlier so that we are not pushing issues to become problems for the next stakeholder in the project, but it should be a more collaborative teamwork effort and breaking down the silos that we've been talking about previously in the podcast, that there needs to be more collaboration and cooperation rather than just handing things off and hoping that someone can continue from what we've created, but really having more empathy and compassion into what we are producing, who are we producing for, and what is the outcome that we're actually trying to achieve. And then breaking down into milestones and the overall steps in the process and making sure that the quality of the outputs is meeting the quality of the outcomes.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar, as you had pointed out to previous podcasts we've done with you and others, I guess, that you have to have a proactive plan as to how the data is going to flow, and the data is
Yes.
flowing because of the interaction between the different spokes of the industry.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why we need data environments, common data environments, and digital platforms, and really like a digital economy strategy and data master plan strategy for the industry. That how do we manage buildings in a digital form and create a digital twin before we have the attempt to create the physical twin? That it's very expensive to try to fix something that you've already produced. Whereas if you have it in a digital format, you can create multiple versions of things and really study that what are the effects of the design decisions that we are making or engineering decisions that we are making, and taking the approach of spending a little bit more time, maybe 20% of the time thinking and evaluating and creating certainty, and then spending 80% of the time in executing something that has already been verified.
And the other thing I've noticed, I just want to get your view on this too, is I've seen a lot more horizontal integration in the industry over the ensuing years. Is that a fair observation?
What do you mean by horizontal
Oh, that
integration?
that you back in the day, you would have somebody who just does architectures, or just architects, just engineers. But more and more firms seem to be having sort of all of the above, down to even construction or at least construction management.
Well, I'm hopeful that that is the route and that is the trend that we're taking as an industry, that people have transferable skills. So overall, as people's knowledge and experience, competence increases over time with their careers, they can do more. And it's more resource efficient to allow people to grow with their careers and grow with something that they've already learned how to do. And that way, you have more resources hand per se for less spend, and you can get more things done. Because when thinking about my career track, that I've spoken a lot about how teams were much smaller in Finland and in Europe compared to how big the teams are here in the United States. People have to wear multiple hats in the same projects to create something. So it's a different approach, and I really support your idea of creating more horizontal career paths for people. That it doesn't always have to be a vertical career path that inspires people. we can expand, and a lot of the skills are transferable. And if people are architects, they can easily learn engineering and vice versa. So it's a smart way of pushing the digital transformation of the industry forward, as well as making sure that people find meaningful careers in the AECO industry rather than being stuck and then choosing a completely new industry.
Sure. And being a very mercantile city in New York, in which I'm raised, it's this is why you have all these roll-ups, right? I've just witnessed fewer and fewer 100-seat, 200-seat firms exist. It's more and more 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, and has a lot to do with the holding company or the whatever the central office that goes, well, wait a minute, if there's a bid on a project that has all these other elements, if we just pick up and synthesize different companies into different divisions under one roof, they can go after bigger awards. I think that's a
Mhm.
very big part of it.
Yes, yes, and that way you can produce things much faster and get into the implementation of the project much faster, and that always means that you're ahead of the inflation curve. So overall, it's a win-win. What you're suggesting.
Although, switching ahead to the owner, you have less accountability potentially, don't you? I mean, if you have the A, the E, the construction management all under one entity,
Mhm.
who's doing the checks and balances for the owner? I don't know if that's a valid point. It just struck me now.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you're making. That maybe there is a gap that waits to be filled, and there is a completely new career path being born from the digital transformation of the industry. That someone that is creating something can be the one that is validating that they do something right. So there needs to be a like a safe way of verifying and checking, but it doesn't have to be a very heavy process. And that's why digital tools like Project Ready, it enables people to do the pre-check themselves and not have someone police them or be the one that then fixes all the problems that have been left behind because people take the easy route of not caring enough.
I have the award. I don't really care. I just want to get paid, basically.
Yes.
But what is the so switching down to the seaport, right? So construction is what it is, right? Putting up and rolling out that asset physically, right?
Hmm.
So going back to the construction manager, I and the owner rep. Well, there's a question for you. What's the difference be the role of the construction manager and the owner rep? Where do they overlap? Where are they distinct?
Well, an owner's rep is it's specifically representing the owner, and almost like being the lawyer on behalf of the owner, and keeping the best interest of the owner. Some of the owners, they might be involved in a project once in a lifetime, whereas a owner's rep, they serve multiple clients at the same time. So they are specialized in managing the best interest of the owner. And construction management, that is focused on the productivity and profitability of the projects, and making sure that things are delivered on time, on budget, safely, and with high quality. So the roles, they can blend, but they are also very specific in terms of the accountability and responsibility of the person holding the role.
So go back to let's talk a little bit about certainly on the tech side, architects and engineers. They both tend to be very heavily Autodesk or maybe Bentley, correct?
Mhm.
The difference between engineers' tech stack and the architects, how distinct is it?
Again, it's starting to blend more, because a lot of architects, they've been the pioneers of digital transformation, so they become so-called citizen developers. They've learned how to program things and create tools that haven't pre-existed. And then fortunately, the big tech companies, they bought the best solutions and integrated them into their ecosystem. So people have skills, and they are not afraid to use them, fortunately. So I see it as a benefit that we can get better solutions and better innovations at a much faster pace when there is a close collaboration between the software and technology companies and the end users. Um, so I'm excited about the trend, and I'm also very excited about the open BIM and open data, and more open approach into creating those new solutions, so that people are not giving their lists of what they want for the big tech companies that then have to go and produce something that people then say that this is not what I wanted. It just leads into very long development processes that don't necessarily please anyone. But enabling the collaboration on digital platforms and opening up systems so people can tinker things and create solutions for the needs that they have, it is now creating way better solutions for the industry overall, and enabling it, innovation and solutions development to happen anywhere. So it's not tied to like a geographic region anymore, or a specific group somewhere or a specific team somewhere. Innovation and development can happen anywhere now. People have the skills to do things.
Well, obviously, those open standards, and I guess I bring in Shaley at this point, have been critical for what we do because basically you have CDEs, but you need an IDE or an integrated data environment. And so, Shaley, what are some of the similarities in systems and needs that you've seen from a platform and functionality perspective, and where have you seen differences?
Yeah, I think like how we've been talking about collaboration, I think that is the key. But along with that, engineers, architects, they all, while working on the same project, I still feel that they have specific specialities. So, like, while the architects create these designs, an electrical engineer needs to specifically work on the electrical side of it, the civil engineers doing their things, but they all have their own different softwares that they work on, but at a project level it all somehow needs to come together. So that's where we've seen a lot of disconnect, where even within the same team all of these different team members are working on different parts of the same project, and they have difficulty bringing that together into, there's no common system as such where it needs to basically come together. But we've seen more and more that people want to bring things in like one location, so that you have that at a project level, that okay, this is when this team completed this work and then the next team took over. There needs to be that kind of information logging, tracking, and just making sure it all kind of stays on track as different companies or even different teams within the same companies are working together.
Yeah, that you have these series of traceable events that hand off between the different groups. And, if even going to straight platform. So architects and engineers will probably both widely use Autodesk and or Bentley. Architects probably more interested in the VR component and augmented reality. Engineers have to be fixated on GIS. And, you go to the construction end of the world and they may be using Procore or ACC. And they're going to have their own software for the execution of what they're building. But the commonality, I think, between them and the owner is what you just mentioned there, Shaley, which is the need to be able to have all those stakeholders and information act in the single context of a project. That is the pain, is the management of and handoff of information in a collaborative fashion. That I think is what the universal challenge is for all four letters of the AECO.
Definitely. And we've seen so many times that there's a lot of manual rewiring needed. People are downloading things from one system, re uploading it somewhere manually. And there's so much room for error in these cases because different team members, different systems, and it just doing all of that manually creates a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and it's a waste of money. I mean, one of our clients, we were talking to, person's an engineer, and they're spending 2 days out of their week just downloading and uploading and logging. It's not a very good use of a well-paid skill set. All right, so let's switch over to the owner. From our perspective, the owner, I always thought their biggest challenge was getting what they paid for, which is not just the building, right? It's all that information that goes into it. And so the owner's role, which is extended through the owner rep, do you see owners becoming more involved in their project versus like, commissioning a building and then that's it?
Very good question. It really depends on the owner. There is now, fortunately, a lot of international investors that are buying real estate stock, and they trade it as they trade regular stock. They buy buildings in the morning, they sell them in the afternoon, and it's more like a financial instrument for them.
Like a REIT.
Uh, Yeah, and in that case, it makes sense to hire someone to do the owner's rep services on your behalf. So you can focus on managing your financial assets, but someone else will manage the physical artifact for you. But then there needs to be very open dialogue about what the expectations about the investment are for the owner. How long do they plan to hold on to the physical artifact, and how do they want to continue to improve it? It really depends on the owner. That do they just want to sit on their portfolio, or do they want to find ideal tenants for it, and do they want to make changes into the building, and kind of like it depends on a lot of things.
It depends
um
on the type of owner.
yes. But overall, like, not all owners reps are the same either. So it's kind of a developing thing right now in the AECO industry, that it's a new type of role. It's existed for decades now, but it's still a new type of role when thinking about the digital um, building portfolio, that you can have digital twins of your entire portfolio. You can see how the different buildings are technically performing or financially performing, socially performing, and comparing them region to region and do all kinds of data analytics. Then the question is that, are the services that are being provided for the owners keeping up with the digital transformation, and what technology can actually do for creating new types of services, and creating value-based services rather than just doing what has been done before. So there's like an opportunity for innovation and creating new types of roles again for managing the digital assets and the digital portfolio, as well as the physical artifact.
Yeah, I would argue that's one of the things about program management. I mean, it's not like program management is new. It's just a much hotter topic because I think, the idea that you're looking at a project in terms of a single asset that's part of a smart city, well, that's a program, right?
Yes.
And so even that, we've seen a marked shift, and from our perspective, the data needs, right? If you have 8 large physical assets of sports stadium, a conference center, and some apartment buildings, um, they're still part of that single portfolio, if you will.
Hmm.
That they're components of that city. And the other thing that it really, sort of just called out to me now too is that even within the O, there's no such thing as a single owner type, right? You can be a manufacturer, you could be a college or a hospital, in which case this is a long-term asset. And the way that I think you need to approach its ownership and ownership of that data and management of the delivery and maintenance is markedly different than the example you gave, for instance, of like a REIT, who's like, we'll put up the money, you build the asset, we're going to flip it, in 3 weeks. It's just going to be part of a portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that what you're describing? Is that it's like that's what I hope that our audience really starts to think about, that the digital transformation is not about continuing the same processes and the same services as before, creating something new that is more value adding and enabling people to expand. So it's a digital transformation is not taking away things, and it's not taking away jobs, or it's not taking away assets or anything. It's enabling people to do more with less, and seeking out new revenue streams and creating new services and new jobs and all kinds of things that benefit everyone that is using the built environment.
Yeah, the digital innovation component actually creates jobs, right? There's nothing but housing shortages worldwide.
Hmm.
I forget what periodical I was reading yesterday, but as they cite, going 2 billion people on Earth at the end of the Second World War, there are 8 billion now. It has, 1 century. It's very difficult to catch up, 80 years, to the quadrupling of the population, and then the new needs around chip manufacture, which is a big deal in the United States and actually around the world now. Nvidia has, well, a number of things have made everybody focus on chip manufacturing.
Hmm.
So there's no shortage of assets that need to be created, and there's no shortage of different scenarios in which things need to be built and why they need to be built.
Hmm.
So even down to the owner, there's no such thing as the owner, right? So when I'll talk to folks and I go, "Oh, one of my biggest clients is a manufacturer," they go, "Well, we thought you worked within the AEC." Yeah, they design things that fabricators build for them that they have to deliver and bring back to their customers. And so, how do you regard them within that AECO? They're incredibly heavy Autodesk users.
I'm really curious about your perspective on how fast the built environment industry is going to destroy, transform now that AI tools are being embedded into like everyday tools. So they're not necessarily specialty tools that the end users are going to be using, but it's going to be embedded in very trivial tools that are then integrated with this specialty tools that Shiley mentioned that the engineers use completely different tools than what architects and designers use, but then there are tools that everyone is using and are becoming the household names. But then if people can be aided and their work can be augmented so that people that might be transferring from other industries into the AECO industry, or we can see a boom of younger generations choosing to be employed in the AECO industry, then they get excited about having more time in their hands to interact with other people and build the collaboration rather than work in a silo and just be in a deep focus mode every day with their own tools and producing their own outcomes. They want their work to be augmented so they can actually embrace their project teams and create something together. So there's a like a generational shift that I'm already seeing in terms of how how the Gen Zers work versus the Gen Xers work, and somewhere in between are the millennials. Um,
And don't forget the
Technology,
boomers, they still own most of it.
yes,
Right.
yes, and technology is there to help everyone. They are new tools, and they are the sharper tools. We can't really shift our own responsibility and accountability on AI and say that, oh, AI can do my work. No, we need to embrace AI as a tool that enables us to do a better job with what we are accountable for.
So, on that topic, right, of AI, and I'm very glad you mentioned that, right? So, we've done garbage in, garbage out, right? We just did a podcast with my buddy Lou from Microsoft on Copilot, and I don't think the industry's ready. I really don't. And how can I put this? So, when we brought this to market, everybody was still on premise, and I had to argue about file systems, right? Even though you had BIM 360 at the time, SharePoint's been around, got 25 years, right? So, it was a someday we'll get there, and the industry is a notorious laggard in adoption of, if you will, cloud tech and traditional tech, just because their focus rightfully is on like GIS and drones, right? But there was they don't they historically have not focused really on back office efficiency, digitization. Well, the pandemic pushed them all to the cloud, which is great.
Mhm.
And now they have a plethora of systems that don't necessarily talk to each other. And to your point, you go, well, AI can fix it. No, the data challenges, as you keep throwing more and more stuff up into the cloud and adding in more and more data. I see it in some larger institutions. I see it warming up, but I think that's one of the big challenges the industry has going forward. If you point AI at really unorchestrated, unreliable data, it's worse than
Mhm.
having AI at all. And to your point, younger generations and anybody, geez, not even that young, right? You have an expectation that you'll be able to work smarter, faster, and have grunt work removed from you.
Mhm.
And so we're still watching the grunt work component dissipate. But I don't think the industry is as ready for AI as well. I don't think the world is ready for AI to the extent that people think it is. I mean, it's very good for the stock market, at least at four companies. But not having your digital house in order, not understanding that data is more than the telemetry of an angle within a structure. It's
Mhm.
all this other information that is just splattered all over the place. That's my perspective on AI. AI has great potential. It is not there yet, and I don't think the industry is really looking at what the hard work they should be doing now is, which is getting ready to have data sets that are intelligible, and that can retrieve intelligent results. So let me ask Shaylee. I mean, what do you observe?
Yeah, I think definitely, as you mentioned, Joe, that the industry is slowly moving in that direction. Yeah, we've seen a shift happening where, okay, maybe it's just because of COVID that people started moving to the cloud. But that's where it is yet, that everybody who were using these on-prem softwares and files are slowly moving to the cloud, but that isn't really going to solve the problem. I think later on, as Sala was mentioning, we start working with digital twins and we have all of this information in proper data warehouse kind of a formatted way. I think in the long term, along with machine learning and AI, it's definitely going to be very beneficial, because as there are longer projects that happen, which are all in the cloud and regulated, and we have those data points in place, I think after a few years it'll start getting better. But we are in the very early stages, I feel, right now. But it's definitely heading in that direction, which is a good thing.
Oh, it's definitely heading there. I just think people think it's going to be easier than I think it will be. And to your point, like let's say you're starting to build an airport now. Well, if you have your, you know, if you have your proverbial together, right, and have a plan for what you want to do with data long term, blah blah blah, those kind of projects will greatly benefit from AI. But if you're using and cobbling together a mix of on and off prem, you have everything in the cloud, but there's no continuity between one platform versus another versus the fourth and the fifth that you're using. I don't see AI helping you until you fix the relationship of data so that you can get meaningful results. And AI is being sold. It's like I've seen so many bubbles in my life, and you think about the internet bubble that was going to change everything until it didn't. Right? It's a slow, steady journey, but that's one of the major challenges I see for the industry. It is really comprehending that AI is not a silver bullet.
Mhm.
That it's going to require a lot of work. Anyway, such as my
Mhm.
contention. I'm not trying to dump on the industry, but but what feeds that challenge, quite frankly, is just the sheer volume of data that the industry necessarily creates.
Mhm. Yes, and the old data that exists is not AI ready, so it doesn't make sense necessarily to start fixing what has already been produced. But there needs to be a strategy for how the AI ready data is going to be created going forward, so that way the overall data master plan strategy and AI strategy, data security, cybersecurity strategy, everything that is related to data management and data sharing, access to data, etc., uh, has some kind of rules and guidelines for it, so that it's not just a wild west out there in a digital format. And then what I'm hoping that our listeners understand, that if they're not taking steps to learn or participate in what is happening, then we can't talk about digital transformation anymore. It's going to be digital disruption. And that means that they're no longer participating in what direction things are moving. They're just going to be passengers on a drifting ship.
Exactly.
And that's going to be a problem going forward, that data is not necessarily comparable. If you have two similar projects, like let's say that someone is mass producing data centers, even though if the data centers are produced from the same drawings, etc., there might be differences, and that way all the data needs to be somehow captured and verified and managed, because you can't really rely on something that is similar. You can't rely on the simulations or analytics based on something that is similar.
Right.
Uh,
Something that's close, but not really
yeah,
it.
exactly. So it needs to be something that is the digital truth about your portfolio or your project or whatever you're creating. And hence, everyone that is producing anything in the built environment in a digital format, they need to be certain about creating the digital truth, because it's a little piece at a time that we are producing new data and information for others. So we need to take responsibility for what we are creating.
And so, what will be common to the AECO is the use and application of AI. What you want from AI will be largely determined by which end of that pool you're swimming in.
Mhm.
So there's going to be that commonality. There are going to be differences in what you want, and the other commonality is all these different disciplines and branches and extension across the A, the E, the C, and the O, both in house and across the industry, have to have a plan or at least some path to having data that makes sense. Otherwise, it's more dangerous than anything.
Hmm.
Again, not trying to be negative. I think it's a huge opportunity. I think it will drive incredible innovation. But again, that's what I think the challenge for the industry is, waking up to that fact that there's a lot of work to do in terms
Hmm.
of getting their data in order, both in house and across their partners.
Yes, yes. So it's in short, like people need to stop copy pasting data and information from past projects to be quick and easy. They
Right.
actually need to put their brain into like why they are producing something, why are they copy pasting something, what is it that they're handing over to others? Because then they are actively just either pushing solutions or problems further down, and it just comes back to bite later on.
Yeah, and copy and pasting is how the industry wins deals, right? So, one of the things I've noticed, so when you go into the other supporting disciplines within an AEC environment, is marketing. Marketing generally is kind of the sales outfit within these environments, and they literally will take projects of similar type. They'll copy and paste. They'll update. We have these people. Here's their profile. Here are their certs. And so even that, don't copy and paste, get it into a database so that you can build it intelligently and in a way where the data becomes fungible. So even that aspect of things. So why are they copying and pasting during the project? Because they probably copied and pasted to win the project.
Hmm.
And it just kind of persists all the way through at that point.
Yes. Yeah, so the original problem doesn't get fixed because they always pick and choose what they picked and choose in the past. Same thing goes with specs that owners manage and put a lot of money into creating, and they hand them over to the AEC partners, and then they complain that the building is not functioning the way that they intended it to function. And the engineers and the designers point at the specs and say that this is what you've been giving us for the past decade. This is what we design and engineered your project to. Like it just it continues to circulate the same problem because then nobody goes into the origin to fix it and put their brain into it.
Well, and for one, if it's 10 years old, there's no way really to go back in time because just couldn't do it, right? So that history goes away. And I think that also calls out that the owners themselves, and again, wide swath of owner of type, need to have a much more active role in the management of their data, their access to it, its relationships, the QC against all of that, as opposed to, well, we paid for it, build it. Oh no, right?
Hmm.
Because the consultants will go, no, we're going to bill you. The owner's going, I don't want to pay you. But ultimately, if the owner really wants to take control of a project, they have to be in control of that data
Yes.
throughout.
Yes.
All right. So what's common across it really is efficiency in data in large measure as the industry moves forward. And I think the other point that we've made here today is that these roles are evolving and increasingly overlapping in a good way. So that would be my closing comment. Shaylee, Sala.
For perfect closing comments, that it's all about collaboration going forward and making sure that everyone is rowing towards the same goal. That we as an industry, we need to identify as colleagues and as partners, creating incredible projects going forward and not continuing to point fingers at who's the biggest problem on the project. We all are, and now we've digitalized our problems very effectively. So now it's time to like re-strategize and embrace what's coming. The technology, I believe that it's pretty much ready for what we need at this point in time. Um, but the processes they need to change and the mindsets that need to change.
Yeah, you're ready to upgrade the kitchen, but you haven't gotten rid of the old appliances, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to gut the place first so that you can rebuild it.
Yep, agreed.
And one other observation I would make is, so, the point of this podcast was to talk about, well, the A, the E, the C, the O, they're all kind of different. Why do we lump them all together? I guess the reason why it strikes me they are all lumped together is because it goes back to that colleagueship. At the end of the day, it's an asset that does something for people, either makes things or people live there or treats water. So that's the commonality, right? Is it all leads up to a physical asset that can span thousands of years, like the aqueducts of Rome.
Yes.
That's what is common, is that there's something being built that human beings rely on and need, and how that all comes together is the AEC and O. All right, I ended my pontification. If you all good, I will close it out today. As always, we thank you folks for coming in and listening today. Any questions, comments, please do email us, info at project-ready.com. You can post stuff on our website, and look forward to the next time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.